will get his fate.
Good afternoon. This is Jean Johansson with the Writers Guild of Virginia. We are welcoming a author today who's launching a new book, and I'm going to turn this over to Cindy Freeman, who's going to do the podcast interview. Cindy.
Welcome, everybody. I too belong to the Writers Guild of Virginia, and we're happy to be launching Patti Gaustad. Is that how you pronounce it, Patti?
It's actually Gaustad.
Gaustad.
You know, it's spelled the way you say it, but
I see. Patti Gaustad-Procopi today. And I will just give you a bit of a bio on Patti. Most of you know her, I guess, except maybe David. But she describes herself as a former Army brat who lived all over the world before settling in Gloucester, Virginia, with her husband, Greg. And there they raised 3 daughters. 2 of them are on here today. So we welcome Elena and Allie, right?
yes.
Yep.
Okay. Oh, I've lost you now. No, there you are. Okay. So they also are very, very much animal lovers, and they've had numerous cats and dogs. And I know that that Patti rescues raptors, but she is actually retired from 2 area history museums. I believe one is Jamestown, correct, Patti?
Correct.
And she finally found time to do things she's always wanted to do, including writing. So she claims that moving constantly made it difficult to make friends and form lasting relationships. I certainly can see how that would happen. So her writing is about emotional connections, friendship, and family. In addition to writing, as I mentioned, she fills her days rescuing raptors and other birds and researching her past on ancestry. She and Greg also love to travel, and they've been busy checking off their bucket list of places to go. Stop Talking is Patti's 3rd novel, but it is the sequel to her first novel, Please Tell Me More. She publishes with Blue Dragon Enterprises.
Blue Fortune.
I'm sorry, you're right, Blue Fortune. I don't know why they both ended up with the word blue, but I always use them. Yes, Blue Fortune. So let me start, Patti, by asking you, I know that like me, you are retired from a totally different career, but have you always wanted to be a writer? I mean, tell us a little bit about your author journey and how it came about.
Well, yes, I did always want to be an author. When I was 5 years old, my dad was a big reader, and I used to watch him reading, and I thought, "Ooh, there's got to be something amazing on those pieces of paper that he's so, enthralled by these books." And so I actually made him teach me how to read, because back in those days, where I lived, kindergarten wasn't part of the curriculum. And so I wasn't going to be able to learn to read till I was 6 and went to 1st grade. So he taught me to read, and I took off reading. I was an avid, voracious reader, reading far above my, grade level. And I just thought, wow, to be able to write and create a book like this. So over the years, I took writing classes in high school and college, and I kind of always had a story playing in the back of my head. But when I actually retired and had time to write, as people often say to me, where do you come up with your ideas? And that, I think, is the hardest part about writing a novel. Short stories, you only need a little bit, but a whole novel, yeah, it was an experience.
Indeed, I could relate. Well, I've read all three of your novels, and I think what stands out for me is that you manage to tap into the universal human condition. And certainly there's something to resonate with every reader on some level. So where do your stories come from?
Well, I think as I said, or as you said in my intro bio, I was kind of a lonely, shy child. I spent a lot of time at libraries. Whenever we moved, the first place I found was the post library. And, I read a lot and I was very hurt by moving constantly because I wasn't very good at making friends quickly. You have to make friends quickly if you're only going to be there for 12 months. My brother was the kind of kid who, we would move into a new house, and by that afternoon, he had 20 friends over. It would take me 10 months to make a friend, and then we were moving. And so I think, just a lot of those emotions and that life is full of challenges and
But do you base
I
some of your characters on family members?
well, I wouldn't say I really base the characters so much. I mean, most of my characters, I would say, are what is that word I'm looking for? An amalgamation of people. There's
Uh-huh.
not one character that I could say, oh, yes, this is based on this person. A lot of the events in my book, the actual things that happen are based on real things, though I often twist them up and switch them around. Like in my first book, which I will hold up here, um, this is a story about two sisters and a terrible tragedy that happens when they're young, and it kind of bonds them forever. And I got the idea for this book. I was struggling writing another book and not getting anywhere. And I was talking to my sister on the phone, and she sadly lost her husband to early onset Alzheimer's. And she met this guy on, I think, Match, one of those things. And she called up to complain about his behavior. And I don't know, this story just exploded in my head. And and my sister was writing a memoir at the same time about what she had gone through with her husband. And so we were kind of bouncing ideas off of each other. And while we jokingly call each other Rose and Ivy, the two sisters from the book, we really aren't those people. I mean, we're just not. There's not a lot of similarities. I think the only thing that's similar between the sisters in the book and my sister and me is just sort of that sisterly bond, going through a lot together. And like the sisters in the book, the tragedy is that their baby sister drowns, and this event destroys the family, and Rose lives with the guilt of this for her whole life because
Her
she
whole
feels
life.
like she should have been there. But um, in real life, I did have a sister who drowned. But as I said, I twist up the events because she was actually the oldest, not the youngest, and I was not born
Mm.
when she passed away. I wasn't born yet. But that kind of thing really, just is a tear in the fabric of a family that you never really 100% recover from.
Well, it seems like your stories hold the perfect balance of tragedy and humor. And I think this book hit me the hardest. I
Oh man.
laughed, I cried, and I felt every emotion in between. Um, when you write, do you write with that goal in mind?
Well, I guess I'm kind of a pantser. We've talked about that in writing, people who plot out their books versus people who pants, just right by the seat of their pants. And when I had this idea, I just would write and it would kind of come to me. But as I say to people, my books are heartbreaking because life is heartbreaking, but they're also really funny because I am really funny.
Yeah.
And so I think the humor comes from, just because I see the irony in life and the humor in life.
It comes through in all of your books. Um, we authors of fiction know that tension and conflict drive our plots forward. I noticed in this book that you embrace that concept even more than in your first two novels. Was that a conscious decision on your part?
I don't think I make any conscious decisions when I'm writing,
So you're
but
just a
I
natural
will.
talent.
No, I think the one thing, the first book I wrote, Please Tell Me More, was, I had no idea what I was doing. I think I just wrote, I would sit down and write and write and write, and I would get a brilliant idea and I'd write that. And it was well over 300 pages. And I had no idea what I was doing. And I finally thought, I need help. I mean, my kids had been great. They read, every chapter I sent to them and said, it's brilliant, but they're my kids. What else are they going to say? And but I finally realized I needed to join a writing group. And while writing is a solitary pursuit, I think we all need to find our people. We need to connect with other writers and bounce things off of them. So I joined the Chesapeake Bay Writers, and then I found a critique group. And in the critique group, of which you were a member of when I first joined,
I was.
um, people would say, oh, chapter 20 sounds an awful lot like chapter 3. And so they helped me realize that the one problem with being a pantser is if you get a brilliant idea, it might be because you already had that brilliant idea earlier,
Exactly.
3 months ago, but you forgot about that you'd already written that. So I finally had to go through the book and write down what was happening in each chapter. And I did do a timeline for the story, which I felt was very important because you had to have the progression of the people. I couldn't get it out of sync.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wrote down every chapter and what was happening. And then I had to pick like chapter 2 and chapter 20, which pretty much cover the same idea, and
Yeah.
kind of pick the best parts and mush them back together and mush them together.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so I got it down to, I don't know, about 300 pages. And then when it was professionally edited, content editing, I think another 20 or 30 pages were whacked out. Ooh, it was such a wound to my soul.
They kill our babies sometimes, don't they? Those
That's
editors.
right. That's right. And but I think that was a learning experience. And
Sure.
so I do think I learned to be more tight in my writing. And I do think there's a lot more emotionally going on in the sequel. And there are lots of ups and downs. And, they talk about story arcs. I think my sequel has about 10 story arcs. It gets up here. Oh, we think we've resolved it. Oh, it goes up again. And
That's good. That keeps the
here's mine.
reader interested. There it is.
Yes. And when I finished the first book, I thought, oh, thank God, I'm done with this. I never want to write again. And I started working on another book that was sort of about, guess what, a lonely army brat and her life. But then my oldest daughter, when she read my first book, she said, oh my God, that's so great. When's the sequel coming out? Because while I felt I had resolved all the people's issues, there was obviously an opportunity to go another step. And for those who, loved Rose and Ivy and William, their brother, and which strangely enough, I have a brother and a sister as well, just like Rose in the book. And so I think a lot of people were like, well, what happened? Did they just live happily ever after? So nothing is ever happily ever after. Maybe happily at the end, but lots of
Not
stuff
in real
happened.
life, that's for sure.
For sure.
Well, let's take a moment right now for Jean to choose our first free book winner.
Ooh.
Patty wants to give away 2 free signed books, her new novel. And so we'll let Jean make that choice. So let us know when you're ready to announce, Jean.
Well, I put everybody's name in a hat and I pulled out David Brown.
Oh,
Yay.
great.
All right.
You just need to email me his address.
Okay.
And
Great.
David,
Thank
would you
you.
just want me to sign it, or do you want to say to David, my new best friend?
Oh, well, just write what you feel. I think if you just sign it is fine, but if you write
Okay.
a personal note, it is more meaningful. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Great. So we'll do another drawing a little bit later. But I wonder, before I ask my next question, Patty, could you give us your elevator speech on this book?
Oh, God.
Just a quick
You mean
synopsis.
that 1 minute thing
Yeah.
you're supposed to be able to say if you run into
Right.
an
I know you
agent?
don't want to give
No.
away the ending, and
Okay.
I won't give away the ending either, but it's very powerful and it's wonderful and very clever, I have to say.
Yeah.
I think it's clever.
I thought it was clever too. I
Yeah.
thought it was clever too. Um, I would say about this book in an elevator, this is the continuing saga of Rose and Ivy and their brother William. And while we think in the beginning that they've all found their happy places and life has, come full circle, and we find out, much like life, that doesn't happen. And a lot of really bad things happen to the family. But it's a story about resilience and love and forgiveness and, just hanging together. There's a sub theme in here, or maybe it's a full theme of, the dangers of, well, not dangers, but about, people suffering from alcoholism and addiction. And that's another very difficult thing for people to have to overcome in the midst of everything else.
Did you have to do any research regarding that component, or do you have that in your family or in a family that you know? Because I thought it was really authentic.
Well, unfortunately, there's probably a lot of alcoholism in my family. My parents were both alcoholics, though I'm saying probably functioning alcoholics. I think over drinking became a huge issue. Maybe after the war, people, were relieved it was all over. They drank too much. And yes, I do have other friends and family members that I was able to, who are in AA, and to, make sure that my depictions were authentic.
Yeah, and I thought it came across as totally authentic. I noticed there is so much psychological and I guess you'd say philosophical insight in your fictional relationships. And I'm wondering where does that insight come from? I mean, Rose is a therapist, so you have to know something about therapy to present her the way you do.
Oh dear. Well, I think that's all particularly made up. The only relationship I have with therapy is like Rose. I thought when I was in college I would study, psychology. And there's a bit where Rose says everybody in class, no matter what psychological disorder they're discussing, everybody thinks, oh my God, is that me? Is that me? So
Right.
I did not end up being a psych major or a therapist. But I think a lot of it just has to do, once again, with just, you live for 70 years, you have a lot of insight into things. And one of the things I think that really touched me as I read this quote that I put in the front of the first book, and I think this is so true of a lot of people, that people just get stuck and can't move on from the pain in their lives, and they want to resolve things from 30 years ago. You can't. So I put this quote in the beginning, and I think this is so important. You can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending.
Right.
And so that was sort of the underlying message of this book was, Rose is tormented by the death of her baby sister, and she's also tormented by thinking that her mother blamed her.
Mhm. And she
And it
was only
isn't-
6 years old.
Yes, yes. And, it wasn't until her mother was dying, because Rose pretty much cut off a relationship with her mother. But when her mother was dying, Rose quit her job and, basically sat with her, day in and day out. And they finally talked and, cleared all that up. And you just think how many people just waste their lives churning about things that happened so many years ago that they cannot do anything about. And then in my second book, I also had a little tag that speaks to me. I put it at the end, though, that says, life is short, and we do not have much time to gladden the hearts of those that travel with us. So be swift to love and make haste to be kind. And I think kindness is sadly becoming a rare commodity in the world we live in. If we could just be kind to each other, what a difference it would make.
Mm. Yeah, everybody's out for number one, it seems.
Yeah.
Instead of caring about affirming other people.
Yes, very true.
That's one thing that I love about the Writers Guild is that as we're all writers of different levels, but I get the sense that we try to affirm one another, try to help each other to be successful. And, you don't lose anything by helping somebody climb up the ladder. In fact, I think it enhances us as writers when we help other people to succeed. I wanted to ask you specifically about Rose and Jack. Now they're childless, and they're forced to raise a teenage girl. The experiences you describe are so authentic and convincing.
Well, you have to remember, I had 3 teenage girls.
Right. That's what I'm thinking. Did you draw all of that wisdom that Jack and Rose show in raising the child that is kind of dropped in their lap as a 12-year-old? I mean, that just comes from your experience in raising your daughters?
Yeah, I don't know that my daughters would say that I had all that wisdom and patience when I was raising them, but maybe the way I make Jack and Rose is how I wish I had been a little more of. And but yes, of course, it does come from my experience of raising my own kids. And once again, Fern is not one of my kids. She's probably glommed up mixture of the personalities of all three of them, and then her own personality thrown in. I really feel like these people, they're real to me.
Yeah.
I feel like I really know them.
And I think the reader ends up feeling like you really know them. I really cared about your characters. I think even more in this book than in the first one. I just really cared about them. And of course, the first book you introduce them, so we find out who they are and kind of learn their personalities and their quirks and their challenges. But then this book, I felt, brought it all together in such a beautiful way.
Well, probably because it was my third book, I was getting better.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, we grow as writers, and that's what it's all about.
And yeah, now I've been in a critique group for, geez, I don't know how many years now. When did you go back to teaching, Cindy?
4 years. I've been out of it for a year, so 4 years ago.
So I joined the critique 4 years. So I've had 4 years of other people's insight. And I have to say, a lot of times I'm in critique group and, they'll be all over me about something like I didn't do this person right or, whatever. And I'll leave very upset and very angry. And I have a long drive back home because we meet in Williamsburg and I live in
Right.
Gloucester. And the more I think about it, I have to think about it. And I'm like, they're right. They're right.
Hmm.
I have to, I have to rewrite this part. I have to rethink this character.
Critique groups feel brutal, but it's really that they're attacking your baby.
Yeah, yeah.
And it feels like they're attacking you. And yet I think if the critique group that you're in is still much like it was when I was in it, it's about helping each other to be better writers.
And whenever I talk to anybody about they want to become a writer, it's the one thing I say is, will you join a writing group and join a critique group because you need people outside your family to, give you insights.
Yeah. Mommy's always going to say, oh, that's wonderful. That's not what you need. You need people to give honest feedback if you want to grow as a writer. So yeah, I think that's one of the most valuable experiences a writer has, that and beta readers, which is pretty much the same thing as a critique group. Very, very important experience. Well, why don't we have another drawing for your second gift, Jean? And you don't want your daughters to be included in this, Patty?
No, I've already given them books.
Well, that's the good thing because today is D-Day and the second there is Diana.
Oh, cool.
Oh, wow. David and Diana. I love it. Okay. Well, I will see Diana Thursday at Critique, so I can bring her book.
Okay.
Right. That's
so Diana, are you a writer as well?
I am.
Yes.
I'm in the same critique group. I have not been in this critique group more than not quite a year yet, but I have been in previous critique groups. So the book I'm working on, I had written the first version, but it really needed a lot of work, so I'm rewriting it. And it has a sequel as well, which I'm trying to work on at the same time.
Cool.
But yeah, Patty and I have traded a number of compliments and disagreeing compliments. So I know exactly what she's talking about. And thank you for the book, Patty.
I'll see you Thursday.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay. Well, for the rest of us, tell us how we can purchase your books, Patty.
Well, actually next Sunday, this seems to be my month of doing things with my books, I will be at the Turn the Pages bookstore, signing copies. And then, you can always find the usual suspects, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. And there are actually copies at Turn the Page bookstore at the premium outlets. Even if you don't see me next Sunday, you can get them there as well. Or if you just stumble upon me in Walmart, I always have books in the trunk of my car.
Smart
I've sold-
move.
I've sold a number out of the trunk of my car.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Why don't we open it up to questions at this point? I'm sure some of you have questions for Patti, and you can either put them in the chat or, well, if we can't see your face, we can't see your hand up. But just go ahead, just go ahead and let us know that you have a question for Patti.
Hello.
David?
has his hand up.
Yes. Hi, Patti. I do have a comment, then a question, really a compliment. I'm not a fiction writer like at all. And so I'm always fascinated how people, the depth of character development that writers can have in fiction. It's just amazing how, like Cindy was mentioning, how real your therapist was in your book. And for me, I would have to do a whole bunch of research and a whole bunch to even get a character that seemed sort of credible. So I'm just amazed at people who can write fiction. So I can't wait to read your book. But what really perked my interest was your story. You say you're an Army brat. I'm in the Navy. I was in the Navy for 21 years. And a lot of the stories that I have are really about other people and ministering in times of grief or in happiness or in sorrow. And it has to do with ministry. But it would never occur to me to, hey, let me take a few of those stories and make them into a fiction kind of, it would never occur to me. I have this haunting feeling that somebody would reach back and say, hey, you wrote about me in your book, and I would just be terrified. You would hunt me down or something. But my question is this, is your writing on some level like a catharsis for you? For your years of being in the military, your years of having trouble connecting or having to be in a transient lifestyle, how much of it is catharsis for you?
Well, I think writing, yes, is sort of a catharsis. You have all these emotions bubbling up inside you. You want to get out. My second book, which we didn't really talk about, I'll Get By, is sort of my catharsis for my lonely Army brat life. And in this, the main character, Jane, is an only child, and like her parents are very much involved with themselves. And not so much her. They're not abusive. They're just, that kind of typical go to the officers club, have a good time kind of parents. And
they're just neglectful, wouldn't you say?
well, not involved. I don't want to say neglectful, just not involved.
Yeah.
And, that kind of sets her up for, making a lot of poor choices in love and in friendship. And so once again, it's a kind of case of she reaches a point when her husband runs off with her best friend and she says, maybe I need to rethink this whole thing. So she goes back and tries to figure out where she went wrong. I think the main reason I write, if there is a main reason, because it ain't to get rich, I'll tell you that.
That's for sure.
Is that I just feel, that these characters have a message for people, and just read my book and you will be so much happier. And I also say,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Pardon, Cindy?
I interrupted you. I had a thought, but go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and I also have the message, don't shop, adopt your pets from the local shelter. There are a lot of pets in my book, and that's something I feel very strongly about. All the sad, lonely dogs and cats in shelters breaks my heart.
Have you ever thought about writing your memoir, Patty?
It's funny you should ask that because I do give talks. I've done it several times about writing a memoir. Well, I
Mhm.
don't call it writing a memoir. I call it telling your story, and that there are a variety of ways that you can tell your story, either through one of those programs like Storyworth or writing a memoir, picking out like you did, your childhood, great memoir, by the way. I loved it.
Thank
Um,
you.
and then doing what I do, which is sort of fictionalizing my life story and
Mhm.
turning people around, turning events around. But so somebody asked me after one of my talks, well, why don't you write a memoir? And I'm like, I am really not interested in burying my soul to the world. I just rather keep it on the fiction level.
Yeah, yeah. I guess that's the safe way to do it. I
Yeah,
struggled, as Jean can tell you, I struggled for years before I
yeah,
published,
yeah.
and I had to change it and I had to take things out. And it's difficult to open up your very soul to the world.
Yes.
But and especially if there are people in your life or in your past who maybe were not the best part of your past.
Yeah, yeah.
And you struggle, whether to be totally honest or not. And if you're not honest, the reader will know.
Well, yeah, I mentioned that in writing a memoir that it has to be the unadulterated truth. And if
Yeah.
you can't tell the good, the bad, and the ugly of your life, don't write a memoir, write fiction. But I have a question real quick for David. So what do you write, David, since you haven't written a novel?
Well, I actually have. So
Okay.
my first series, Spirit Soundings, it was a journal that I kept on my Navy ship, my first Navy ship, before, during, and after 9/11. So I
Mm.
read about what America was like before, during, and after 9/11. So it's sort of like a piece frozen in time about uh, our country at that time, but from a chaplain's perspective. My next book was Lost Summer. It was dealing with loss and recovery from Hurricane Katrina, and when we were down there in the Gulf, helping people just start from scratch because they'd lost everything. My new
But
series,
they're
I'm
but
sorry.
they're nonfiction.
Yes, well, yes, they are nonfiction.
Okay,
Yes,
they're not novels. They're nonfiction.
they're nonfiction. Yes, and that's why I was paying you a compliment, because I just, people are just gifted in different ways. So my new thing, really, and I think Cindy knows this, really, like in the last month, is that God's given me a desire to write poetry. Now I am just really not even out of the cradle in writing poetry. There's so much I have to learn. But for me, it's so fascinating. What I am reading in books and stuff like that, it's just fascinating. And it's a
Yeah.
very immediate and provocative and poignant way of expressing yourself. And it was like this light bulb just came on. And so that's what I'm currently sort of quasi writing right now. But fiction, that's a deep end of the pool that I'm not, I don't know if I'm trained to swim in.
Well, I always say to people who write nonfiction, oh my God, that's work. You have to research stuff, or people who write historical fiction and they have to figure out, what kind of underwear Mary Queen of Scots was wearing. And I'm like, no, I just write like, I mean, it just sort of pours out of me. And I don't want to have to stop and say, oh, gee, what was happening in the world at this moment? Though it's funny, like I said, I did a timeline for my first book because I had the kids being stuck in front of the TV and their mother putting a video on for them to watch. And a friend of mine who was sort of acting as a beta reader said, when is, how old are they? Aren't they like the same age as you? When you were 6, did you have a VCR? And I'm like, Oh, you're right. There would not have been a movie shoved into the machine to keep the kids occupied. So that's when I went back and actually had to say, okay, they were born, and kind of from my own memory, what was accessible at the time. And I wanted the brother William to go to Vietnam. And then I realized, no, he was much too young. The war was well over, and so I had to mix that up a little bit. So sometimes you're driving along in a fiction book, just happily plowing ahead, and you run into this wall, and you're like, "What was I thinking?"
I have a question.
Go ahead,
Yes.
Diana.
Uh, Patty, you're working with a publisher, and I am curious how you connected up with that publisher, and how much marketing help do they provide, like the Zoom meeting or with you at the bookstore next week? Are they involved with that, or is that you doing your own marketing?
Well, how I connected with a publisher, I did, as I said, I did everything wrong. I had no idea what I was doing. I just thought I was writing the next New York Times bestseller. And, if somebody read the first page of my book, they would sign me to a multi-million-dollar contract. So before my first book was actually, written, finished properly, edited, everything. It was too long, it was too jumbled up, it was too repetitive. I was already sending query letters out. And I did get one request for a full manuscript, but I think by the time she probably read it and thought, God, this girl needs an editor, she was like, this is really good, but I'm just not gonna take it on. So that was very discouraging. And I will say, if you have a thin skin sending out query letters, I mean, I think I'd rather stand naked in front of, Times Square than ever send out another query letter. They are so soul searing.
Yeah.
So I decided I knew nothing and decided I'd join a critique group, and I'd kind of start from scratch. And I did win a couple of small awards. I came in second in the I can't even think, the Keating Award. I think Chesapeake Bay Writers Keating Award. I came in second for fiction for something, and then I came in first for the Chesapeake Bay Writers for the Golden Nib one year. And then I actually had a short story published in a literary journal. So I thought, okay, this is not a complete fantasy. I guess I can write. I'm not a bad writer. So, but I had kind of just pulled back on doing queries and all that stuff. I was licking my wounds, peeling off all the rejections taped up on my wall. And
You saved them? I
no,
shredded them.
no. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Thank God this is all done by email. I can't think about the days when people used to have to bundle up their manuscript and mail it off. Um, no, I didn't. But so anyway, I was just rethinking the whole thing, and I belong to LinkedIn. They always say you have to have this social media presence. And someone posted on LinkedIn, write the first, I don't know if it was sentence or paragraph of your work in progress. I'm like, what the heck? Okay. So I wrote it, and I got a response from Nariel Living from Blue Fortune Publishing and said, send me your book. And I had actually seen Nariel along with Jean Johansson here, and the other lady from Blue Dragon, whose name I can't think of.
Dawn.
Dawn.
Mm.
Dawn.
Dawn.
Yeah, the three of them, and you were there, Cindy, gave a talk about small local publishers.
Mhm.
And I think I talked to all of them afterwards, but they were sort of all saying, yes, we're kind of, full at the time, but keep us in mind, and so I once again felt rejected and dejected, and But anyway, so Nariel sent me this note saying, send me your manuscript. Or maybe she said, send me your first 20 pages. I don't remember. But in any event, she got back to me and said, well, this needs a lot of work, but I like it. And so she picked me up. But as far as marketing, I've heard even the big traditional publishers don't do a lot of marketing anymore.
No, it's really up to the author.
Yeah, I mean, Ariel does some things. I think my second book she put on NetGalley so that people would read it, and you're supposed to do a review. One of the worst reviews I ever got was on NetGalley. So anyway, she does some things, but I think unfortunately in today's world, the author is the one that has to, book the book festivals and the bookstores and carry your books in the trunk of your car and badger your friends and family into writing reviews for Amazon. Marketing is something I'm terrible at. And, I love talking about my books, but I don't like doing whatever it is that paying, and people will love to send you, oh, just hire me and I'll, make you $1 million in the first year. And you're thinking, really? Well, what about all those other authors? Why didn't you make them $1 million? So yeah, marketing is the worst part of writing. So I kind of try to skip the worst parts.
Jean does an excellent marketing workshop. And
I should take it.
Well, I think we're going to, we've been working on, as the Writers Guild, we've been working on setting up some venues for master classes and workshops and book signings. And so it looks like the Tides Inn is going to be one of our venues.
Ooh, nice.
And, once we, sorry, Jean?
I said, yeah, it's really nice. It's Sunday afternoon, they serve champagne. They call it high tea, but it's tea and champagne and hors d'oeuvres. And we're doing poetry in February because it's Valentine's Day. That's what they asked for. And in March, we're doing one of our members, Ren Kenzie, is an Irish poet. And so he's doing it. That's the St. Patrick's Day happens to fall on Sunday this year. So he's doing a talk about Irish poetry. The Writers Guild is really about marketing. And like today, your podcast today will be posted on our YouTube channel. And also you'll get a copy so you can put it out there. We believe that all of our members are responsible for marketing each other's books. And many years ago, somebody said to me, I've been at this for 15 years. And many years ago, somebody said to me, when you're at a book show, you should have a copy of somebody else's book on your table. And you should say something like, have you read this book? This is a great book. And you would be surprised if we've got 10 authors at a book show, each one of them is responsible for doing that. And you'd be surprised how many people buy that person's book because, gosh, they're not all about themselves. And then they'll go over to the other table and buy that person's book. It's sort of a
cross-collateralization.
Thank you. I couldn't think of the word, so I'm talking away.
You taught me that word, Jean.
It's cross-collateralization. It's the idea that we're all word artists. That's what we do. We don't paint with a brush. Some of us do, but we paint with words. We paint a picture with words. And we're all in this together. And the group that we have at the Writers Guild, I love them all. I do. I love you too, Patty. But they are committed to that. They are totally, completely committed to that.
Patty's in the Writers Guild.
I am.
Yeah, I know.
I'm a member of the Writers Guild.
That's why I said that. No, that's why.
David is too.
Yeah. I will say that, Diana, that joining groups, Like I'm a member of the Chesapeake Bay Writers, I'm a member of the Virginia Writers Club, I'm members of the Writers Guild. You know, it gives you the opportunity to meet with other, you know, other authors and other people in the business, and, you know, get out there, go to conventions if you can. There's some, you know, inexpensive ones. I think the writers, the Virginia Writers Club convention is like, I don't know, $60 or
Yeah,
something.
it's coming up. I'm a member of that, and
Well,
I've
it's
been
usually
to
in
book
August.
shows, like in
Yeah.
Charlottesville and around,
Right.
and so I
So
understand.
there's, you know, and unfortunately you have to be on social media, and I belong to way too many book groups on social media. I get so much stuff. I'm like, next, 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 next. I can't even keep up with all of it.
I
And
love
whether I've ever sold one book on by belonging to Facebook, I don't know, but you never know.
Never
When
know.
I was at a writing a book selling event up at in Loudoun County at one of their libraries, that Sonia, another connection, she said, "Oh, I used to go to this, but I can't this year, but it's a great thing." So I've gone now, I think 3 years. And there was the first year I went there was this woman sitting across from me who had this huge billboard that was being blown over by the wind. Luckily, my son-in-law was there and fixed it for her, and it was a picture of some famous actress whose name I can never remember. She's the one who went to jail for paying somebody to take her kids' SATs. And she's on a show on Hallmark about
Yeah.
this woman's mysteries that she wrote called The Garage Sale Mysteries.
And they're great.
Yeah. And I mean, I've never read her books. I haven't seen the show, but she said, I was like, wow, how'd you get on the Hallmark Channel? And she was like, oh, a friend of mine read the books and she loved them, and she knew somebody who was connected to the Hallmark Channel, and she sent them to them, and they kicked them up the, you know, you never know. You just never know. I keep waiting for that to happen to me.
Magic, for the magic to happen.
That's right. But in
Yeah.
the
Well,
meantime,
how are
I've
we
met.
doing on time, Jean?
We've got 7 minutes.
Okay. Does anybody else have a question for Patty? Or a comment?
Well, Patty, I host the indie author social every month, and in that social this last month we were talking about marketing. And Patty, I want to give you this idea because I think you would do it. They put the link to their book on Amazon in a QR code and printed it as a magnet and put it on their car. And she's like, I'm driving down the road, I'm at a stoplight, I see people with their phones doing my QR code.
That's awesome.
So I'm
Yeah, I was interviewed by a lady who who interviews authors over 50. That's what her podcast is called.
right.
Authors over 50, because she started writing after she was 50, and she thought, oh, I wonder if there are any more out there. Now she's found hundreds. She can't, you know, she's booked for 2 years or something, but I got on there, and she had a QR code that you could click on to go to her podcast. And I actually, you know, did a poster with me, you know, saying so and so's talking to Patty Procopi about her book, and I had a QR code. So I take it to book festivals and I say, oh, if you want to hear me talk about my book, just scan the QR code. So I am a little tech savvy, very little, but I did do that much.
Yeah,
But I
Yeah.
like the idea of driving down the road and people
that's
scanning
great.
the bumper of my car.
Well,
It is.
I guess we'll wrap this up then. Thank you all for coming, and I hope you'll talk Patty's book up, because the best recommendations
Yes, yes, word
are
of mouth.
people like you. Let me